welcome to Whisky.com, where fine spirits meet. And today I'm in the heart of Scotland, near the city of Dufftown. Yeah, Dufftown is known for their many distilleries, but today we're not in Dufftown, but near Dufftown at the Glenfiddich estate. And you can already guess what this video is going to be today. But the Glenfiddich estate is very, very important. It has 1,200 acres of ground. There's a bit of cattle farming, there's a bit of growing barley, grains on there. But the most important thing here on the land is Robbie Dhu, which is a water source. And you can hear it in the background. Yeah, so back in the days when they built the Glenfiddich distillery, they really had a bit of a fear that there were more distilleries being built here, and so the water source would have been tapped by other distilleries as well. And William Grant, who built the distillery, didn't want that. So what he thought was, okay, I need to secure that water source, but water source in Scotland, springs are public property, so you cannot own a water source. So what he did is he said, okay, let's buy the estate around it. Nobody can build a distillery here, so then my water source will only be for me. The people of the town obviously can have a bit of the water, but the main water source for him is secured. So this is the main reason why the Glenfiddich estate is the Glenfiddich estate, and pretty much nothing is being built on this estate. Yeah, so now let's head down to the distillery and see how Glenfiddich is made. The history of Glenfiddich is a long one, and it starts with William Grant. And he is a proper Scottish guy, and he was distillery manager Mortlach at the time. So he earned about £100, just to give you an imagination how much someone makes at that time. And he decided for himself he wants to do his own distillery, and he wants to name it Glenfiddich. So what he did is he looked around, and money was a bit short because he had 7 sons, and he would really try to give his sons a good chance in life and develop them and give them university degrees. And some of them got captain in the army, and some of them became doctors. So he really had to spend some money into his family. So he was a bit short on money, but he got a very good opportunity because Johnny Walker, big blend at that time, bought Cardew. And what the Walkers always did is take out all the equipment and put in brand new equipment so the distillery would last. So the old equipment was in really good shape, and he bought it for just over £100. So that's why you can imagine now £100 was a bit more than his year's salary. But he was really short on money because of his family. So he couldn't really afford building a distillery, and you can't really do it on a field. So what he did is he just got all his family together, 7 sons, 2 daughters, and maybe already a stepson or something, or son-in-law, that's the word. And so they built the distillery together. Some of them were too little and they just ran to the town, got water, got food, but the others hurling stones, building and building and building, getting in the equipment and starting the production on Christmas Eve in 1887. And here you can already see the family crest with the shield, the red shield, white line, and the 2 cavemen there. I don't know why they're cavemen, but they're cavemen there. And 1886 was a bit of a strange year to build a distillery. But it ran well. He had a big contract with the big brand Patterson's, and it ran so well he built another distillery called Balvenie, but more to that when we visit that distillery in a few weeks. And so he had a good contract. It was running well. Another distillery, 2 distilleries now. And in 1892 there was a big crash because the Pattersons didn't play by the rules. They were a bit inflated, and they inflated their numbers, and Suddenly everybody realized how inflated it was, took all the cash out, they got insolvent, they got bankrupt. So it was a really big turmoil. It was called the Patterson crash. And yeah, then suddenly the distillery was standing there. They were pretty solvent. They were a family business, doing everything by the books, but they didn't have any customers anymore. So they had 2 distilleries and no customers. So what they do, they said, let's get a bit of grain whiskey in and build our own brand. And they named it after the family motto, which was Stand Fast. And that was a big brand then. They became kind of a big brand. And so they actually did do a bottling hall here. So they said, okay, we are bottling our own whiskey now. And they bottled the whiskey. Also, they bottled some Glenfiddich whiskey. It was not Glenfiddich single malt. Here it says fine old Glenfiddich pure malt with a bit of a different family crest on it with the club and the half-naked caveman. So, but it already became Glenfiddich. The name was out there, and that is important. Charles Gordon was, I think he got married into the family, but he was kind of in the sales of the whiskey. So he went to Glasgow. Glasgow markets was really satisfied with whiskey. There's a lot of whiskey coming in from the Highlands, Lowlands, everywhere. So London also pretty much saturated. He got a bit more sales there, but then it was a bit of a discussion to go to America. But he thought, like, everybody goes to America to sell whiskey. Let's head to the east. So he headed to India, to China. So he made really a big voyage. That was still a big thing in 1909. And he got a lot of contracts in China and India. So they were selling a lot of whiskey to the east. And that was really important because as the prohibition struck, the whiskey sales went down to 0, or the whiskey exports to America went down to 0. That was not just hefty for all the bourbon distilleries, but also hefty for the Scotch distillers. And so what they had was really good because they could ship their stuff to the east and still sell a lot of whiskey. And during the time of Prohibition, they even increased their production. So they increased the production, they increased the stock because the Grant family knew there is something coming after the Prohibition. And after the Prohibition, the people who have the whiskey after the Prohibition will be the one who get rich. And said and done, and the Prohibition ended and they could sell the whiskey really, really well. In 1957, they actually got themselves their own coppersmith who built new stills and also maintained the old ones. Really good for a distillery if they can do it on site. The coppersmith is still there. He does a bit of things, but they are now also with full size. Yeah, in 1961, that was the first time Glenfiddich as their own brand. So the Glenfiddich brand was something. It was already established for, I don't know, 50 years or something. They changed to a triangular shaped bottle and still had the family crest, but the triangular shaped bottle was something to stand out and something that people could see. And yeah, that was good. Then Alexander Grant Gordon, also named Sandy, was on the Scottish Malt Whisky Association board. And he got to talk to a lot of distilleries, and he actually was the one who was pushing for Glenfiddich single malt whiskey. So he was the one who has written down the rules how to do single malt whiskey, and that was then a protected brand under the law, under the Whisky Association, as we know it today. So before that, it was straight malt, pure malt, and all that kind of stuff. But afterwards, you had something that was single malt that was different to all the blends and would later help distinguish between the blends and help the rise of the single malt whiskey. In '63, Charles Gordon introduced the stag to the bottle. So it was kind of a rebranding where we had the stag in front of, instead of that family crest with the cavemen. So it was really not recognizable. It was really filigrane and small, and with the stack you could easily distinguish it. So let's go a bit more into the New Ages. So in the New Ages, or like earlier ages, we start with 1969. Glenfiddich was out there for now probably 60, 70 years as a whiskey with the name Glenfiddich. So, and with the title bottled at the distillery, people wanted to see, but how was Glenfiddich made? And they started to come to the distillery. And back in the days, it was just when someone comes by, the production staff, if someone has not too much to do, they just show them around how stuff is done. But it became more and more and more, and yeah, so the distillery manager was getting a bit cranky because his production was interrupted. And so what they thought up was like, let's do a visitor center, let's do tours. So in July 1969, they actually did open the first distillery visitor center. And yeah, they beat the other distillery with private hands by a few months. Yeah. Then in 1970, they got a big award for foods and drinks. They got awarded by the Queen for Queen's Industry Award. But still in the 80s, the whiskey industry was going a bit downhill. So the marketing team came up with a lot of fancy bottles with a lot of big pictures and ceramics. I do have to say, I do love them. I had in the 90s, when I still did handling of whiskey, I had these bottles and they are amazing, but I don't think they are around anymore. They started the Solera process for the Glenfiddich 15-year-old, and in 2001 they got the world's best whiskey for their 40-year-old Glenfiddich. But yeah, let's face it, a 40-year-old Glenfiddich is really good. They did the Artist in Residence program. And also a big thing, in 2010, there was a huge snowing in. So they said they had 8 foot of snow, which is about that high. I would say like 2 meters 10 or 2 meters 20. So the warehouses were not built for that kind of snow. So one of the warehouses actually did collapse, and that was a bit of a problem. You have a lot of casks that are now homeless. And so they could take out a lot of casks, put them in other warehouses. Some casks broke with, I don't know, falling beams or something. But they still had too many casks they couldn't find a home for. So what they did is they did a huge bottling, and it was called the Snow Phoenix, and it was a blend of, I think, 13 or 15-year-old to 35-year-old Glenfiddich, so kind of a really big thing. And they sold it for, I don't know, 60 pounds or something around there, or 50 pounds, and it was a really good bottle for a really good price because they had to move that stuff out. And it was a huge bottling. Now they sell for around $900 on, second-hand markets, let's say it that way. But it's a really nice story. They repaired it and the warehouse is up and running again. So yeah, that was the whole history of Glenfiddich. The mashing here at Glenfiddich is magnificent. Glenfiddich is the biggest single malt distillery in Scotland, with above 20 million liters of pure alcohol per year. I will ask the exact numbers later during the interview. So they used to have 1 Porteous malt mill, and in 2019 they got 2 new mash tuns, so they doubled their production. And believe it or not, but 1 malt mill was not enough anymore. So they wanted to buy a second Porteous malt mill, couldn't find one. They're not being made today anymore because they are too good. So they actually had to get a new industrial one, unfortunately. So yeah, the magnificence of the production is they use 160 tons of malted barley each day. And they use it in batches, so 16 batches a day, 10 tons get mixed with 39,000 liters of water at 65 degrees Celsius. and it's being mixed in with the intake, and that is the first water. A lot of sugar, a lot of starch is being split by the enzymes into sugar, so very, very sweet wort is coming out, drained through the bottom of a false floor. And the second water is then, it comes in at 85 degrees Celsius with 10,000 liters that you fill in with around 49,000 liters, and you get about 40,000 liters of wort out there. The water is still stuck in the draft. The last water is a recycling water, or with 29,000 liters at 85 degrees Celsius. So it takes out all the last bits of the sugar, and it goes into a recycling tank. So they take the water from the third water and use it again in the next batch for the first water, just to increase efficiency. The draft afterwards, so the rest, what is left, the protein, the hard bits, they actually used to go to the farmers, but now they go into a bioreactor that produces methane, and also the rest of that is usable as fertilizer. So it's really a nice biological cycle. So the farmers get not left out of the game, but not the cattle farmers, but now it's the, I don't know what kind of crops they grow, hopefully barley. Yeah. So after the 40,000 liters of wort have been produced, let's head on to the fermentation. So the distillery used to have 24 washbacks when Horst was visiting the distillery in the 90s. And in 2019, they doubled the production, and now they have 48 washbacks. But don't worry, they are all still made of Douglas fir. Some of them are really old washbacks. Some of them are new. They have a lot of new ones as they just expanded. And yeah, I've heard actually how you build such a washback. If you look at the roof doesn't look like it has been replaced in a long time, so they don't come in through the roof. So they actually do build them in place. It takes a team of 8 people about 3 weeks to rise that big ton. If you look at cask or barrel production in America, if you have an American standard barrel, you raise the barrel in about 30 seconds if you're good, or 25 seconds if you're really good. So yeah, it gives a little perspective of how big this thing is. Yeah, let's talk a bit about production. So you fill it with cooled down wort. So we have the wort with 65 degrees Celsius. You cool it down to around 19, 18, 20 degrees Celsius. Depends on if it's winter or summer. In winter a bit higher, in summer a bit lower, to have the same production. And then you add 250 kilograms of yeast, and it starts boiling. The first it starts pretty rapidly boiling, so you have to have these switcher blades there. They are just a regular fan, and that hit down the foam that is actually foaming up, so these switcher blades prevent the whole washback from bubbling over. Yeah, and after 48 hours, the alcoholic fermentation is really through. So if it would be just for the alcohol in Glenfiddich, they could really stop. But Glenfiddich is not just about the alcohol, it's very much about the flavor. And so what they do is they have 72 hours of fermentation, which I would say is a bit longer than normal. And at 72 hours, you get a really fruity spirit. Here at Glenfiddich, they say they're looking for orchard fruits, so pears, apples, and yeah, kind of fresh fruit. And that's really it's a really nice flavor. What I found really interesting is they have a yield of 9.5% alcohol. So 9.5% alcohol is quite a lot. So they have pretty much a lot of sugar in there and a pretty good yeast to reach these kind of amounts, because the more alcohol you come out here, it's easier to produce in the next step. The distillation at Glenfiddich is somewhat special. As I told you, they are the biggest single malt Scotch whiskey producer in the world, or in Scotland. It's the same as it's Scotch whiskey. And they produce 21 million liters of spirit per year. That is a very, very huge number. So in 2019, they actually built a second still house, which is kind of L-shaped. So you have 2 corridors going down, with a lot of stills. And let's talk about the old still house. The old still house was indirect fired. Direct fired, you had a flame of gas flame below that, and that was heating the stills. So you had to have the rummagers going around. There's big chains going on at the bottom, so not the sugary bits from the wash, they don't stick to the bottom. And Glenfiddich always works in triplets. So you want to have the wash still, which is filled with 9,000 liters of volume and burns very quickly, or stills very quickly. This is normal. Every wash still is distilled very quickly. You come out with about 25% alcohol, and then something special happens with Glenfiddich. They actually do split it into two spirit stills. And one spirit still is what they call a conical one. Yeah, it looks very conical and it has a constriction at the bottom. And then we have the reflux one. So you have a reflux bowl and you have a lot of copper contact there. There's a lot of vortices going on. So a lot of stuff gets recycled, redistilled. So in the end, what they have, small stills, a lot of copper contact. So they're making a really a finer, easy drinkable Scotch spirit. And with the wash, it is really fruity, pleasant to drink. So this is the style that is going on with Glenfiddich. And with these triplets, you can see they're always going one bowl, one reflux, one bowl, one reflux, and this goes on and on. The old still house has exactly 5 triplets, and the new still house has a bit more. It is not going like 2 spirits for 1 wash still exactly, but that always works together a bit when wash still is washed, cleaned, or one is inactive, needs maintenance and stuff. So in the end, they do have around 40, 43 stills. Yeah, in production, there's one that is actually inactive, but 42 stills produce 21 million liters of alcohol per year. That is a huge number, and it's a very beautiful sight to look at. So I can highly recommend to come here. It's just amazing. Yeah, after the spirit has been created, it obviously has to be matured. And I'm in here in one of the traditional old warehouses. This is one of the Danish style warehouses. Old stamped earth floor, thick walls, and yeah, very nice climate. Obviously they do have palletized warehouses as well. Just to give you a round estimate of how big this here is, you have 43 warehouses with a combined total of 1.3 million casks. And this will not stay constant. As they've doubled their production, they are having much more output than they have warehouse space, so much more whiskey coming into the warehouses than going out of the warehouses. So they do have to build new warehouses every year. So I guess they will have, next year they will have 46 or 47, and adding 1 or 2 warehouses each year, depending on how big the warehouses they are building. Yeah, this is how big the production here is. But there is a bit of they're a bit old traditional style. Nowadays, every distillery goes for bourbon cask maturation, then you do a bit of a finish behind that. Here they do 90% of their whiskey not finished, but double maturation if you want to have a sherry in there. And it's you have something matured in a bourbon cask or a bourbon hogshead, and then you have some other stuff that is matured in a sherry butt or sherry hogshead, or I don't know, anything, and then they are married together. And they do this with big marrying tanks. This is actually a bit more traditional. These are 2,000 liter tanks. They are not meant for maturation. You're not allowed to mature whiskey in over 700 liter oak containers or wood containers. So they are just for marrying, not for maturation. 2,000 liter containers don't really add much flavor. It's just the volume in there compared to the wood size, or the surface area is very small. So there's little added to it. Just marry that together. And this is what they do usually when you have double maturation. And then they also found the Solera procedure. That actually comes, I think, from Spain, where they have a pyramid of of casks. You fill the top and they're all connected and they flow down to the other casks, and at the bottom you take something out. So the whole Solera system is based that it's never been fully emptied, and this is what they copied here. So they have their Solera procedure is you fill up the Solera tank to the very top, and then you let it marry there. Then you take it out about halfway, and then you fill it up to the top. So it's never empty. So that stuff from decades ago, a little bit is still in there. It's not about the stuff from way back in the day, but it's a procedure that gives you a very good consistency. The way of marrying that gives you a very consistent spirit. You can marry it together and match the flavors that you want to have very consistently, very precisely. The thing is, all the 15 years have to go through that Solera vat number 3. And that is a bit of a problem because the demand is really high, production is really high, so they can't marry it for 3 months anymore. They marry it for a shorter period of time, and then they also use normal marrying vats, which is pretty similar to the big Solera vat. Yeah, so this was the standard stuff that they do around here. They do have experiments. I've seen some firkins over there and some very small casks for very fast maturation. There is an IPA cask somewhere around here, and yeah, there are different kind of casks that have been just recently been legalized, so they can experiment with new casks, and hopefully you'll find some special editions coming out that are really good. So after all of that, they do have their own bottling line on site. They share that with Balvenie, but they bottle their own whiskies, which is really cool. And then it goes up to international shipping to your door. And yeah, let's have a little bit of a tasting with these Glenfiddich whiskies. So I'm sitting here with Struan Grand Ralph.
Perfect.
And you are here, you've been in the whiskey industry for 23 years. So you're definitely not a rookie, and you've been with Glenfiddich for 9 years. So thank you very much for having us at the distillery.
Bitte schön. Guten Tag, meine deutsche Freunde, meine Damen und Herren. Ja, ich heiße Struan. Ich komme aus Nordost-Schottland, in der Nähe von Dufton.
Okay.
Ja, ich arbeite für Glenfiddich für 9 Jahre.
Okay.
Und das ist alles meine Deutsch. So we can switch to English.
Yeah. So, Struan Grand Ralph.
Yeah.
Grand. Are you related to William Grant?
The wrong Grant.
The wrong Grant.
So just to give you an idea, in my high school, which is in Forres, very close to where we are now, I would say every 4th person was a Grant. It's a very common, common name. Yeah. So actually this area around Craigellachie is the seat of the clan Grant. And actually if you have a look at any of the old bottles of Grants, or in fact the mirror here, the motto of the Grants is stand fast. So it kind of means stand together, essentially.
But is it a motto of the Grant family, or was that of the Grant clan?
I would say that the family and the clan are all part of one and the same.
Okay.
And certainly if you meet any of the family here, they're very proud of that Grant heritage.
Okay.
And Grant is on my mother's side, and then Ralph, the family name, is on my father's side.
Okay, I have seen a lot of double names in the family tree.
Yeah.
Is that common around here?
Yeah, quite often taking the second name from your mum as a middle name, and then the family name comes from dad.
From the dad. Okay. Yeah. I was really excited about that family tree and that history. I do love the history of Glenfiddich. It's just a nice family business.
So it's very easy to learn. You know, when you sit down to look at different whiskey distilleries in Scotland, normally they've been built sometime in the 1800s, normally Victorian or pre-Victorian.
Yeah.
And then they normally shut around 1920s, then they get sold in the 1950s, then they get reopened, then they get bought by Diageo, then they get sold to Bacardi, then they get shut again, and then they get open again. Glenfiddich is very easy. Opened in 1887, one family ownership for 6 generations.
But still, you had some changes, and it was really interesting how you say, okay, we've been with the Patterson Trash, and blend, pure malt, straight malt, single malt. So that I really love that, because it wasn't like World War One, World War Two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose you and a lot of your viewers will know that whiskey's not always been as popular as it is today, and whiskey has been very cyclical from, you mentioned the Pattersons, mentioned Prohibition, mentioned First and Second World War in terms of changes in demand and production. The warehouse next door to us here was actually used for sugar during that period, so the casks were taken away and it was full of sugar rations.
Okay.
But Glenfiddich has produced whiskey every single year since its foundation.
Nice.
Under the same family, William Grant, Elizabeth Grant, his wife, handed it down to 7 sons and 2 daughters. And from then on, we're now with the 6th generation, which...
Nice. So what are we having today?
Glenfiddich.
Yeah, but I've seen the bar. There are so many expressions. So what are the 4 expressions for today?
I think we thought we would go with the core range,
Yeah.
the sort of the backbone of Glenfiddich, and no better place to start than with this bottle here. So it's Glenfiddich 12-year-old.
Okay.
This is a bottle that makes my job very easily. So I obviously travel a lot for work, and
Did I mention you're the global brand ambassador?
global brand ambassador, yeah.
So you represent the brand all over the globe.
I try to, yes, try to.
Yeah, you can't be everywhere at the same time.
No, and we're in about 180 countries with this. So
Ooh, 180 countries.
I'm quite fortunate, because if you go into the dive bar, the 5-star hotel bar, everything in between, you tend to find this green bottle. And I'm imagining people that are watching a whiskey YouTube channel have tried this already.
Yes, yeah. I think everybody who is a bit more into whiskey, or even not, who's a beginner with whiskey, has a Glenfiddich at some point.
So that's a good point. It's normally the first whiskey that people have tried in terms of single malt, and it tends to be the one that starts the whiskey journey.
Yeah.
If it's not us, it's maybe Glenmorangie, Glen Grant, something approachable, Glenkinchie, Balvenie.
My first was the Balvenie.
Balvenie. Another good place to start, right?
But that belongs to you as well.
It's classic Speyside. You've been around the distillery today, so you are familiar with this very particular note of apple, pear, sweet flavors, cut grass. So that's the new make style, and then you get a little bit of the age style.
I find a lot of the washbacks in there. Yeah.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, you really should.
We had a lot of smell in the washbacks today.
Good.
And that was the apple and the pears, I would say.
One of the most important places for me in the distillery is the car park behind fermentation.
Okay.
Because actually we're venting all the air out from fermentation to an area at the back. So if you stand there and smell the air, it's the exact same note.
Yeah.
So if you ever do see me just standing in the car park smelling the air, I'm working. Okay,
You're working.
It's very serious business.
So what is the maturation on this one?
Typical Glenfiddich, and that will go across all of these, is going to be about 80% American oak of some kind, and then 20% European. That gives us the style that we want. So it's not overly sherried, it's not overly American oak, so it's not just all vanillas and things like that. What I love about this is there's a flavour that's created on its 3rd day, so 72-hour fermentation at Glenfiddich. There's a flavour that's created then that stays with us for 12 years, which is a lovely thought.
Yeah.
So we're really not trying to add too much or take too much away from that flavour. We're just trying to mature it, augment it, and it's...
I have to say, with fermentation, you really have it nailed down, because 72 hours, yes, it's a bit longer, but it's not like a few others that have 100 or 110 or something like that, or 90 hours. And you have 9.5% alcohol in your wash, and that nice apple pear flavor. That is a good recipe for fermentation.
We'd be expecting to get over 10% on wash.
Oh, okay.
Maybe not quite this time of year, it's still a bit warm. If you control temperature, we use a liquid Maori yeast. We control the cleanliness, it's all wooden washbacks, which are slightly more difficult to keep completely sterile, but that does give you some maybe active sites on the wood that can add to the complexity of fermentation. So after 72 hours, we'd expect to get to about 10.1% ABV, which, 72 hours or maybe longer. I think a lot of distilleries are going for longer fermentation times now, because if you're trying to drive this fruity, estery, complex floral note, you're only going to get it with 3-4 day fermentations. Springbank maybe pushing the boundaries with that, with like, 145 hours, 150 hours.
Springbank was a long time ago for me.
Yeah.
I think that's now 8 years ago.
That's about the length of their fermentations.
Yeah. So lovely, very fresh, fruity, nice, gentle smell. So
Slange.
Slange. Now I see why you can bring this all around the world. This is just a very, very friendly Highland Speyside malt. But still, is that sweetness? Is that a touch of sherry? Because I would have expected less of the sweetness. It has a good amount of sweet touch to it.
Yeah, it's quite sugary, like a candied sugar. I would say, so you're obviously going to cover Balvenie as well. In terms of the two 12-year-olds, Double Wood and Glenfiddich 12-year-old, ours is like fresh fruit from a tree, really honey, sugary, fresh fruit, pear and apple. Balvenie 12 is like the same fruit but in a cake, so it's all like rich and more fortified. And for context, Glenfiddich and Balvenie are only about 400 meters apart. It's just but you managed to produce significantly different new makes, significantly different aged ranges, just by changing very fundamental things in the whiskey's creation.
Yeah, Balvenie is going to air in 2 weeks, by the way.
Okay, good.
from the viewer's perspective. Okay, so I think you touched already a bit on my second question, or my first question. So has Glenfiddich ever been sold or discontinued or closed down or anything?
Glenfiddich, no, and that's very rare. I think, as we mentioned, the distillery has a very, very proud history of family ownership. Remained independent, where very, very few whiskey distilleries have managed to do the same. And we're now 5th and 6th generation of the Grant Gordon family that look after William Grant's as a business.
Yeah, that is really nice. If you look like family business, it's hard. I think you have 5 like really family big board members and a few family that is just working up through the company, as I've heard. So that is this is amazing. But for me also amazing is the story about the Prohibition. But as I've heard, like the Prohibition was like your kicker to produce more, export it to your contacts in the East, and just become a dominant player in the business.
I think, and even more recently, the Whiskey Lakes, the 1980s, where a lot of distilleries in Scotland were overproducing. We had decreasing demand. The world started drinking vodka, God forbid. And terrible time. And there's too much whiskey and we weren't selling it. So, it saw the demise of a lot of very, very good malt distilleries. As you said, Glenfiddich and Balvenie looked for different options. We tried to tap into a few new markets like travel retail. We started to introduce, more of a gifting angle by introducing the secondary pack on a whiskey, which in turn employed more people here because we could take people out of producing whiskey and get them designing boxes and secondary packs, which was, you'll talk to a few of the guys here that actually did that. And we produced more rather than closing down and having, no new make spirit. The strength or the kind of the advantage or the strength of any malt whiskey distillery is what it has in barrel.
Yeah.
So obviously the Whiskey Lakes ended. 1990s, you see another uptake in demand for single malts. and
That was
we were ready
pretty
to.
much when we took off, and I think now Germany is also not a small market anymore for the whiskey industry.
Top 8 for us, I think.
Yeah,
Top 8 in the world.
It's definitely there on the map because before the 90s we were just fruit schnapps and corn, which is kind of a vodka. Yeah, so I'm really excited about the next one because you have a special process for that.
Yeah, and actually, this is a whiskey that's born out of that 1990s era.
Okay.
So, Glenfiddich had kind of a challenge on its hand at this point. The world was familiar with this green bottle, triangular shape, light, fruity, sweet profile. But actually, here at the distillery, we were making a lot of different styles of casks, so sherries, new oak, things like that. So we designed a Solera system to kind of give our consumers a 15-year-old, so it's also 3 additional years to the 12, but it's made in a completely innovative way for those days, which is a Solera system.
Yeah. So the Solera system, you're kind of starting the Solera system at 15 years. Because as I remember, the Solera system is you put some I don't know, is it wine or is it brandy or is it fortified wine? I think, isn't it?
The process comes from sherry, really.
Sherry, yeah. But you put in new sherry in and it drips out the bottom. And
the way I like to think about it is, the young sherry can learn something from the old sherry, and the old sherry can learn something from the young sherry. And I think that's the best way of imagining. Whenever you have your year's production of sherries, or it happens in port, rum, you combine it with older barrels so that you get a consistency of flavor, you're building complexity, and it's something that we adapted. So we don't do a Solera in that sense, cask by cask. What we have is a large Solera vat. In 1998, it was filled full of 15-year-old whiskey. Since that time, it's never been empty, which is a lovely thought.
Yeah, this is a lovely thought. But the thing is, you start off with 15. That's kind of a Solera marrying rather than a Solera maturing.
A Solera system, yeah. I think if you went to a Spanish bodega, you would see something slightly different. So I think it's important to say it's inspired by, and it's a whiskey interpretation of a Solera system.
Yeah, if you do the Solera system, they would say maybe there's 0 years old whiskey in there, so no whiskey. If you, but I like your system. I like it.
The crucial thing is everything has to be 15 years old before it even gets in there. So as you're nosing this, and if anyone is trying one at home, it's a lovely thought that the youngest whiskey in there is 15. But have a thought about what the oldest whiskey in here is. And then if you do get an opportunity, taste this whiskey next to some older bottles of 15-year-old, if you have some in your collection. And there should be some really nice consistency in the flavor, but a gradual building of the complexity and the richness. Because what that Solera system doing, every single week, and it's a warehouse just beside us here, warehouse number 8, every single week, just introducing sherry, bourbon, and new oak casks in a specific ratio, just to continually build that complexity. And it's all there.
That was the vat number 3 that you saw in the last scene.
And it's about 30,000 liters of around about 55% ABV whiskey. So it's not a good place to drop your phone. It's not a good place to have a little because. Or maybe it is.
I think dropping a phone in there would be a huge disaster.
Could be catastrophic. You don't want to go swimming in there.
No, I always when I walk around and I come to the wash bags, that's the worst place for me. I was like, pack your pen in and hold tight to everything. Oh, but it's lovely.
Yeah, and you got a nice kind of evolution from 12-year-old stepping up. This is really bringing out more of those honeyed, rich fruit, cakey kind of flavors. Sherry is more dominant, but the really interesting note in here comes from new oak. So new oak is obviously something that isn't used that often within Scotch whisky. Typically our oak barrels are coming second-hand from somebody, whether it be winemakers, sherry producers, port makers, bourbon producers. This is a new oak barrel that virgin oak is quite drying and quite green, and you get, I think if this was just sherry and bourbon, 15-year-old might actually be too sweet. but you've got this kind of new oak just to taper it. And also, new oak is a little bit like, you know when you're making like spaghetti bolognese and you add Worcester sauce?
Okay.
It's just something that can tie everything together. It's like...
So, but what you do is you double mature. This is not new oak as a finish, but as in you have some bourbon barrels, you have some...
Yeah, so some of the bourbon will go straight into the Solera.
Yeah.
Some of that bourbon will be taken to one side and finished in a new oak cask.
Okay, in a new oak.
Because if you did 15 years in new oak,
that would be a bit
it would
harsh.
be like licking a tree. Yeah, it's not. There's nothing.
Okay, so you do have a bit of finishing in there. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. It's a little bit less fresh than the 12, but as you said, more of that sweetness, cakey, dried fruits, sherry notes.
It's a great food whiskey as well.
It
Really
has
good.
more of a sherry part than the 12, right?
I would say so, and it has the 12 is quite laser focused on fresh, green, sweet flavors, whereas I would say this is more of a broad, this is a whiskey that I can pour for Isla heads, people that like smoky whiskies, people that like young, fresh, peated whiskies, people that like big, rich, sherried whiskies. I feel like this is one that is what we would call like a crowd pleaser.
Yeah.
And it's really good with food as well.
This is very good introduction, and this is then more of the complexity advanced one.
Yeah, I would say it's like graduation and then university. Maybe it's,
Okay.
try not to like obviously over 18 though. By the way, it's important.
Yeah. Okay. So
Slange.
Slange.
Do you cut to an advert at this point?
No. But this is first I thought it's just more round, more creamy, more cakey. But when I swallowed, you have a little bit of a orange touch to it.
That's new oak. That's new oak.
New oak. Okay.
Clove and orange zest.
And a little bit more spicy, full-bodied. Yeah. Now I know what you mean with the whole thing with you can give this to a Isla malt head, and you'll find something. Yes,
Everybody.
you will find something in here. It's a
Even if people drink Abuna for breakfast, like it's like even if they drink I don't know Highland Park 18 for lunch, it's like it's got enough of a rounded nature and richness. I think it's for my money, this is the Glenfiddich that covers everything for me, and by far and away my favorite.
Yeah. So I've been to I think it was Shanghai in 2012, and we've been to one of these sky bars, and there was I think it was a rich person. He had a green bottle which was triangular shape. Couldn't see what, but I assume it was yours. And he was like pouring it like half on the floor, half in the glasses. So there is a huge consumption of Glenfiddich around the world, and you obviously just expanded. So how is that going with the brand? Was the expansion? How are we experiencing that? Is that just going to kick in 10 years or?
Oh yeah. That's the interesting thing about whiskey, right? Because you do a lot of work now here at the brand home and the distillery, but we don't actually see the finished product until probably around 2030. I would say in terms of the guest experience, it's a beautiful still house to go and see. It looks like a cathedral.
Yeah.
It's been built in a very sympathetic way to the rest of the distillery. So we moved some of the copper from our old still house 1. We moved those stills into a new still house. We added some more. So we have 43 copper pot stills here, but they're small. A spirit still here at Glenfiddich is around 5,500 litres, fully charged. So we're making a lot of single malt whiskey, but we're making it in really good small batches with a combination of different heat sources on distillation. So direct fire and indirect fire, and with 2 different shapes on our spirit stills. So everything is done to help create complexity in the new make and consistency. And in terms of what we can produce there, it's really in keeping with the style of the brand, the DNA of the distillery. new make spirit almost straight away was of a very good quality. We have obviously Brian Kinsman, our malt master, constantly monitoring that. We also have a tasting panel here at the distillery who each day will sit down and nose new make, Tullamore, Hendricks, Balvenie, anything like across our spirit production. And I think Glenfiddich, although it's a very large distillery, everything is done to focus on quality.
Okay. So in terms of volume, are you satisfying the demand up till now, or?
Yeah, I would, because there's two different areas there, right? So there's the volume that you're making now, 2023, but then you also have to consider what volume are you making in the year 2000, or in 1980, or I just tried a whiskey from 1958. So it's an unusual thing with whiskey distilleries where your actual products come from a generation before you.
Yeah.
So we would almost see ourselves as customers of whiskey makers that came well before us. So in terms of the future, yeah, I feel like the business is making enough to future-proof the brand. But equally, you know, we have a very large selling core range of whiskies in front of us right now, and we have enough to fulfill that demand. Even with your friend in Shanghai pouring it on the floor, I would rather he was pouring it in glasses. But
me too. I was a bit like, oh no.
There's old people crying in Scotland at that point, you know, like.
Yeah, I know. It was just it's like, oh, come on, this is whiskey. This is not a vodka.
But we have I would say, an enviable position in terms of age stock. So if you've been into a few warehouses today, you'll see an incredible array of 1970s, 60s, 50s. There's, you know, if one family owns your distillery for 6 generations, you keep the best stuff, right? Whereas I feel like if your distillery has been bought and sold a few times, and it tends to be the case for Islay distilleries, there's not a lot of old. They've been sold quite a lot. Ardbegg's a great example, right? Bought and sold so many times, and equally, aging very rarely takes place on site on the islands. So once your stock goes off or onto the mainland, and becomes more of a maybe traded commodity, and you know, a lot of these distilleries have been bought and sold by different people. The first thing I would do if I bought a distillery and I've just paid for it is sell some old stock.
To get the money back.
But if you have one family running one distillery for 136 years, there's never been any need to do it. So.
Yeah, because you think more about your children than like short-term liquidity.
That's it.
Yeah. So the next one is then, if we look at when you produced this, like 2005 then. That's just always, when you look at the numbers, is crazy when you think about when it was actually made. 2005. I was like a child back then.
I wasn't.
Yeah, I was not a child. I think I was.
Germany was just warming up for a World Cup, weren't they? 2006.
Okay, yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'm not such a soccer fan.
Glenfiddich 18.
Okay.
So you're moving into more of a small batch. Actually, a very good way to think about the way these whiskies are made. 12-year-old is about 12% sherried. 18-year-old is about 18% sherried. And Glenfiddich 30-year-old is about 30% sherried. So it's a really easy way to remember.
Oh, that is
it's not exact, but it's a good way to kind of guide it. And out of all the whiskies that we make on site here, 12, 18, and 30 are made in the exact same way. So it's a small batch ton maturation. So we're taking the whiskies from barrel, disgorging them into tons, and they spend about 6 months marrying in a ton before they go to bottle.
Yeah, I have to say, I've seen a lot of distilleries. I think I might have visited already 250 or 300 distilleries.
Wow.
But I've rarely seen these marrying tons, like 1 or 2 distilleries, and just for special bottlings. But you have like tons of them.
We have tons of tons.
Tons of tons.
I'm pointing to the side here, but warehouse 6 is next to us right now.
Yeah.
It's just tons. There's no casks in there.
Oh, okay.
It's all tons.
So this marrying is really a big thing for Glenfiddich.
Well, think about this.
Yeah.
Think about where the Grants and where our malt masters, David Stewart and Brian Kinsman, they built their knowledges making blends. And the one thing about making great blended Scotch is allowing those whiskies to come together before they're bottled and marry. So the best analogy is, if you make really good soup on Monday, it's better on Thursday because all the flavors get a chance to, I don't know if you're a good cook or not, so is he a good cook?
I'm good. Medium, I would say.
People are saying you're a good cook, so flavors and liquids especially, once they get a chance to really get to know each other, you get more balance, you get more consistency. So Glenfiddich 18, the process would be 18 years of maturation in bourbon and sherry cask, and then transferred into a Portuguese oak tun for at least 6 months.
Oh, okay. So are these tons really old?
Yeah, they're old.
Okay.
They were brought here by the current chairman, his father, and his father recognized, based on making Grant's stand fast, the blend, all their focus and all their skills and experience, and that goes for David Stewart, malt master at Balvenie for the last 60 years, malt master at Glenfiddich when this was created, 18-year-old. He had learned from blending whiskey that you just give everything a chance to settle and marry. We could take these casks, get them in stainless steel, put them straight to bottling. But then you're left with a whiskey, in my opinion, that doesn't carry the balance. And if there's one thing that Glenfiddich is totally defined by, it's balance. And balance of flavor, the delivery, and staying very true to a classic kind of Glenfiddich style. We don't release sherry bombs, we don't release a lot of very smoky whiskies. What we do is a very consistent core range of really balanced, highly, I would say, precise whiskies.
I still do have a bit of that, washbacks. There is a good amount of apple. Pears, a little bit less. So it's not as fresh as the 12, definitely not.
Yeah.
And yes, but it shows the age.
I really like that. Look at this as a little brother.
Yeah, yeah.
They're made in the same way. That thing you said about the apple, but if that's a fresh apple from a tree, this is a baked apple with cinnamon and sugar and ice cream. So
the thing is, we had a bit of a statistic how people like whiskey, and the perfect age was 18 to 21.
Yeah, in my opinion. I genuinely, I tried a whiskey today from 1958.
Yeah.
It's over-oaked. Right?
Over-oaked?
Over-oaked.
Okay.
No surprise, right?
I do like the old ones really, really good, but I think people also consider a little bit the price in there.
It also, right, you can spend 50 years in a rubbish cask.
Yeah.
It's happened. And you can spend 15 years in an absolutely stunning, subtle cask and get incredible flavors. I think, like, for Speyside whiskies, in my opinion, between 15 and 23 years is a very nice sweet spot.
Yeah.
For highly peated, like Isla whiskies, island whiskies, I think 5 to 12 years old is a very nice sweet spot. I would say my favorite smoky whiskies are all around 10.
Okay.
And then maybe
I think if you have smoky whiskies that are above 20, then the smoke just...
Well, then on the other side, I mean, you very rarely taste incredibly old Bowmores and Ardbegs and Lagavulins. If you do get a chance to try them, old smoke is quite amazing, but that has to be like 30 years in when the phenolics have changed.
Much less smoky, I would say.
Yeah, because casks also have an influence on phenolics, whereby they change them. And like, I mean, even Craigellachie down the road there, or Bowmore, that classic flavor of like smoky gunpowder pineapple evolves into something very tropical when it gets incredibly old. But I guess it depends what you want from peated drams and what you want from, I mean, we do make peated whiskey here, but we definitely don't have seriously old peated whiskey yet. We started doing it in 2003, so 20 years.
So nice. Slange?
Slange. What
I also do like is, I incredibly round.
Yeah.
And yeah, as you said, balanced. You have a bit of everything, but a good amount more volume and strength to it than the 12. But it has a bit of that character of the 12. So yeah, little brother, big brother.
It's a nice tasting.
With a bit more.
It's a really nice tasting. If you ever get a chance to do just the 12 and the 18, if you're, pushing the boat at the 30 as well, and it's a nice gradual progression in age of whiskies that are the exact same style.
So you would say that is like the 30 then the granddad of them both, or is that unrelated?
Dad, yes, son, dad, granddad. Yeah, that works. As long as they're all over 18, I just want to stress that. It doesn't sound like... yeah, and then maybe this is like a really friendly cousin.
It's a bit different, but...
And the 21-year-old is like a... sort of like... maybe the outlier, because we have rum casks here actually, so it's...
this is a bit dancing out of tune, okay.
Good. Dancing is, yeah.
Yeah, so I've had a lot of information here. I think the video got quite long, but didn't answer one question in detail yet, which I wanted to ask you. So why the triangular shape?
Yeah, good question. So any of your engineering friends watching will know the triangle is one of the strongest shapes in physics, three-sided shape. You'll also know that malt whiskey is made from three things only. Water, yeast and barley. So we're inspired by the fact that you can create all these flavors, not just at our distillery, but over 150 in Scotland now making single malt, all use the same three ingredients, all totally unique. There's something very nice about that. We also have a designer in the 1950s called Hans Schläger, he's German, and he was also inspired by this, and he liked the fact that when you poured a triangular bottle, it's almost like a handshake. See? You pour it the same way like a handshake. And then they tested it here at the distillery, so we're here in Dufton. In the late 1950s, they brought triangular bottles up here. Everybody liked it because you could hide it under your bed at night and it would never roll out from underneath.
That is a good thing. Oh, it doesn't roll.
Done. Forget about it.
Okay,
we're not judging any of you if you have whiskey under your bed right now. So there you go. It's never changed. And
I've heard there's that one famous brand with the squared ones, but that was just to store them closer together and make the transport cheaper.
That sounds very Scottish, right?
I think he was of Scottish descent.
For them, it was also there was more area on the front for branding, right? So they had a square shape, and they put the label an angle, so you have more space for detail, which is quite clever.
Oh, that was the Scottish brand. I was thinking about the American brand.
Okay, they both start with a J, I believe.
Yes.
Okay. I just tried the Jack single malt.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I have that in that yet.
Yeah.
Okay. But that people with the square bottle go for cheap, and you go for non-rolling and a bit of that spiritual with fours.
And if you're sitting with a Glenfiddich at home. We have the Valley of the Deer, so obviously Glenfiddich, the Valley of the Deer.
Oh, this is this.
So that's why
this here is the valley.
So the stag lives in the valley, right?
In the valley, the valley. Ah, interesting. Ah, nice. You learn something new every day.
Well, I hope so. Do we have time to try 21?
Yeah, sure.
You're going to edit this right down.
Oh, this is going to be a long one, but not the longest one.
Okay.
You're quite a talkative person, but not the most talkative person on the world.
Okay.
But it's nice. So this is a bit different shape. Is that just because it's a...
Yeah, we're going into the next range of Glenfiddich here, which is known as the Grand range. So it's just a sort of bigger, thicker bottle. Glass is a bit thicker. This is the Grand Reserva. So this is a rum cask.
A rum cask. Interesting.
It's a bit of a dry cork. Okay. You like the label on the back?
Tramming on. Is that
only
because of tax or?
It just means that these bottles have been earmarked for dramming at the distillery.
Okay.
That's what it means. Yeah. So, it's the first cask finish that we're trying here. So, finished for a minimum of 6 months in Caribbean rum casks. So you take 21-year-old Glenfiddich, which is already pretty rich and robust, and actually the whiskey is really nicely oaked. And then you just give it like a flourish of rummy sort of notes. So look for the tropical notes, the brown sugars on the nose. For me, I'm always trying to find some like toffee, banana. It should stand out quite a lot from.
I would have, in a blind tasting, I would have not. If I had that sequence in the blind tasting, I would have said it's younger than the 28, just because it's more fresh, fruity.
Younger than the 18, you mean? Younger,
Yeah, because the 18 has a bit more of that spicy and that hefty character.
Yeah, that's true.
But what is probably then underappreciated is how round it is.
So you're also looking at a lot less sherry in this, and I think
a lot
also
less
like
sherry. Okay.
sherried whiskies around 20 years, that kind of dominates the nose sometimes, whereas there's much less sherry in the vatting here.
So a bit lighter, because I think American oak and then rum cask is probably
light,
also American oak.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah,
So less of that tannins from the European oak.
exactly right. And then Luke, especially, there's a little bit of almost like a black pepper, a little bit of levity here. So it is sweet banana, creme brulee, especially on the nose. But then there is just a little bit of levity. Some of those kind of valenoids, which maybe don't smell too much of vanilla, but might be more like a sort of pepperiness in the dram. Okay. Slange.
I think there's a problem because of it's getting into the dangerous territory because it's so easy to drink.
Yeah, this is the.
This is a bit so like when you pour too much, you will have too much.
This is the. If anyone tells you they don't like single malt Scotch whiskey, you have to pour them some. Actually, 21-year-old Glenfiddich or 14-year-old Balvenie, really nice access points for people that want to just experience the great sweetness and fun.
Wait, the
single malt whiskey.
Balvenie 14 is also the Caribbean rum.
Yeah, it's a slightly different rum that's used, but yeah, same. It's quite a nice tasting if you ever want to put them side by side.
I like it because you feel the 21 years, but you also have the a bit of that fresh that notes that are more associated with the younger ones, like freshness, over sweetness, bourbon cask sweetness, and these rum casks. So I like it that you have an older one with rum.
Yeah.
Usually it's usually you have most brands go for like 10 years and then they have the finish. This one with, you said 21 and then finish.
Yeah.
That is
it's a gamble,
something
right?
different, and I like it.
You can also see texture is a little more oily here. Mouthfeel, I would say, is a little bit fuller. It's not all sweetness. I think on the finish, there's a nice, it's not quite smoke, but it is a kind of char. It's almost like you're just on the beach with the barbecue type of note, maybe grilling like a pineapple. Because there's absolutely no peated malt in here, but it does just have a little whiff of something almost charcoaly, minerally. And the whiskey itself, for me, is always after dinner, 21-year-old. It's always like, I don't want to be having this early in the day, or, I mean, this is, filming this, 3 in the afternoon, so.
This is the earliest for you.
I could go earlier. But it's just great with dessert. So things like creme brulee, like things like panna cotta. And if you are having a whiskey tasting, it's a good idea to leave this one towards the end.
Yeah, I think you could also have this like instead of dessert.
Well, that's true. Yeah. That would be like a health decision, right? Okay.
I really have to cut down on my sugars, and I think whiskey still is with the sugar content. It's sweet, yeah, but you don't have any sugar in it really.
Yeah, it's also gluten-free. It's
Yeah.
also vegan,
Yeah.
isotonic.
Isotonic?
don't
I haven't heard that yet.
It's basically a superfood.
Basically. Yeah, I really do love, and that's really great. I'm amazed how I didn't have that much Glenfiddich yet, because it was always like my father's brand. I do the YouTube channel with my father, so always the Glenfiddich was always for Horst, and now I'm going to have more of that. No, I love it.
Okay, well that's mission accomplished for me then.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you very much for having us here at the distillery. It was a very lovely visit. I've seen so much, and yeah, it was just always a bit of a different experience if you see a new distillery. Oh, old distillery. So yeah, thank you very much for having us here.
Pleasure.
Yeah, and thank you very much for watching this video. If you found this video interesting, then please feel free to share it with your friends. And if you want to get some of the nice Glenfiddich whiskies, have a look at Whisky.de or Whisky.com, and you will definitely find a lot of Glenfiddich whiskies there. This is kind of the core range, so you will probably find all of them there. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.